Halloween, our thoughts turn to such frightening things as the witches of Old Salem, vampires from Transylvania, and the magnificent haunted houses of New England. Yet in truth, Indiana can match anywhere else in the world for tales of mystery and horror. For generations, strange stories of Indiana's darker side have been told, but only within recent years have these stories been collected. Up a crumbling, winding staircase in Bloomington, Indiana, lies the path to the Indiana University Folklore Archives. Within its walls are innumerable files and literally hundreds of stories about Indiana's ghosts, goblins, and monsters, and all are said by their tellers to be true. We would like to invite you to take a trip with us now into a world you've never seen, even though you live in it. Let us tell only a few of the many stories there are to be told. Be warned, you may find these stories frightening, even shocking, but every story is drawn from the files of the Folklore Archives. Are they true? Well, perhaps you should decide. After all, you do live in haunted Indiana. Perhaps the most beautiful feature of Indiana is its wooded countryside, the rolling hills and magnificent colors that make it an ideal home for those who enjoy hiking. Of course, some woods are better for hiking than others. After all, you wouldn't want to hike in a haunted woods, unless, of course, you didn't believe in such things. There is a story of a professor at one Indiana college who did not believe. Some 75 years ago, the people of a small town discovered that a murder had been committed. Outraged, they turned their anger against the only stranger in town, a salesman, and chased him into the brush. He eluded them for a day and a night, but eventually he was caught. And, despite his cries of innocence, he was hanged. It is said that his spirit still haunts that woods. But even despite evidence of that crime, the professor was skeptical. After all, a ghost holds no terrors for an educated man. Again, the chase lasted for a day and a night, but this time with a happier outcome. The professor escaped, and was thought by local townspeople to be lucky indeed. After all, you shouldn't walk through a haunted woods, especially on the exact day of the ghost's hanging. Many people feel that Indiana is quite a romantic spot, a nice place to marry and settle down. Yet Elvira Hicks had a serious problem. She wanted out of her marriage but didn't believe in divorce. After all, the minister had said, "Until death do you part." So Elvira decided to sort of speed things up a bit. While her husband slept, she poured gasoline throughout their home, soaking every piece of furniture. Then, standing by the back door, she threw a lighted match which instantly ignited the house. Of fate are mysterious indeed, and Elvira's husband awakened and escaped out the front door. The back door was locked from the outside, and Elvira could not escape, perishing in the flames intended for her husband. That is said to be the reason that on certain moonlit nights, Elvira's tombstone can even now be seen, shrouded in ghostly flames. A story that reflects a fundamental truth about haunted Indiana, that it cannot be predicted or avoided. After all, maybe you don't plan to hike in the woods or go camping, and just maybe you can keep from driving at night. But you were planning on going to bed tonight, weren't you? One night, surprisingly close to where you live, a boy named John prepared to go to sleep. However, he did not sleep long. Light of day, a mysterious sound coming up a few stairs did not seem quite so frightening. More than likely a trick of the wind, or perhaps just imagination. Unfortunately, such comforts tend to fade with the setting sun. Explained to his parents about the sound coming closer and closer to his door each night. His parents assured him that with the front door locked, he must have been imagining things, probably from watching too much television. He was completely safe, no matter what he thought he heard at night. The next morning, John was a little late coming downstairs for breakfast, so his mother climbed the stairs to his room. Why, without someone to wake him, John would just never get up.
You're watching Sleepcore. Pleasant dreams.
The following is a special presentation from Antietam Cable Television.
Every area in the county has its own history of ghost stories and legends that were handed down through the generations. Some were attempts to explain unusual phenomenon, while others were intended to amuse and frighten children around the fire at night. The tri-state area is rich in history and in myths and legends that are unique to this area alone. Each segment of this program will highlight an individual location or event as related by local residents and historians. We invite you to join us as we explore this unusual aspect of our local history. Before we begin telling our tales of ghost and haunted places, it may interest you to know parapsychologist's definition of such spectral phenomenon. What is a ghost? Why do they only haunt specific places? And for what reason? Do ghosts really exist? Or are they merely the product of man's creativity and imagination? Professor Gilbert Hall has lectured on these and other related topics for many years before widely diversified groups of people. Currently, he's teaching a course entitled Parapsychology, ESP, Ghost and Immortality at Hagerstown Junior College, and will now attempt to answer some of our questions.
Some years ago, when I was a member of the full-time teaching staff here, the college asked me to go out on their Speakers Bureau circuit and talk as a kind of a public relations, I guess you'd say, gimmick for the college, part of their recruiting policy. In casting about for a topic, I soon discovered that more people were interested in parapsychology and ghosts and related topics than almost any other subject. When the subject of ghosts is first raised, immediately there are several basic questions. One, what is a ghost? Where is the ghost? What am I really experiencing? How do I know I'm not drunk, I'm not hallucinating? Well, one of the jobs of parapsychology, as I understand it, is to provide some kind of an intelligible framework within which the ghost will make sense. And that's what we're going to try to do today.
In order to understand the theory behind the existence of spirits in our world, Professor Hall explains that you can't always believe your eyes.
One of the first kinds of questions one often gets when talking about ghosts is, where are these ghosts? Where is my dead Uncle Charlie? And the problem of accepting the validity of the phenomena often lies in the fact that most people in our kind of society, so-called modern scientific world, both professional academic type people and the so-called lay people, the reason they are reluctant, or one of the reasons they are reluctant, to accept the validity of ghosts and similar kinds of phenomena is they just can't fit it into their, what they would consider their common sense view of reality. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit now about that so-called common sense view of reality and indicate that reality is not quite that common sense. As the chart here indicates, the so-called energy spectrum, that is the electromagnetic spectrum, which casts the energy onto our eye that enables us to see the so-called real common sense world, that in that energy spectrum, only a very small segment, this thin sliver that goes up here to the point of visible light, only that very small sliver is responded to by the human eye. Out to the right, we have the shorter wavelengths, so infrared, radio waves, and broadcast bands. Those are invisible to us. Out to the left, we have the higher frequencies increasing as we go from right to left. Ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, cosmic rays. The point which is very clear as per the chart is that almost all of physical reality is imperceptible to us. So you've got to remember that the so-called common sense world that everybody talks about is a very thin abstraction or a lifting out from the total reality. And actually that common sense world is a construction of the human mind based on very few cues. That's one point to keep in mind. So this should break down the barriers a little bit of the skepticism of the validity of the unseen, because almost everything is unseen. The view you get from spiritualists and Eastern philosophers and yogis and people such as that who have their own kind of cosmology, their own kind of model reality, is that as we go from right to left on this diagram and you get increasing frequencies and wavelengths, that there are other worlds out here, worlds beyond worlds, as Walt Whitman used to say, you know, worlds within worlds within worlds. And these worlds are interpenetrating and are right here where we are.
Now the questions arise. What are these other worlds like? And if it is possible for individuals to return to this world, what draws them here? We're here in beautiful Williamsport, a small town with a big history. Bordering the town is the surging Potomac River and the copious C&O Canal with a history all its own. Did you know that this little town was almost selected to be the U.S. capital? There's something else that remains here that so few people know about. It's the legend and memory of a mysterious lady found many, many years ago to wander the dark streets, alleys, and cemeteries of Williamsport. Her memory has faded with an era when ghost tales were matter of fact, and those who didn't believe were very few. Listen to just a few of the local residents who explain their accounts of the days when the Veil Lady roamed the streets of Williamsport.
The legend was that they had a veil over their face and supposed to have been seen by various people, although I never saw it. I've heard it when I first moved around here. I was living on Vermont Street, which was back in 1923, 24. And as a child then going to school, people would, especially around Halloween, would say that the Veil Woman's out. And he was afraid to go up in the cemetery because it said she's up there behind some tombstone, they'd say. But I was around with some of them looking, but I never saw any place.
The legend of the Fair Lady in Williamsport has been around since I was a child. My father talked about her, my brothers talked about her, the old people in Williamsport talked about her. Some joked, and some was very serious about her. My experience with her, it was very serious because she was very weird looking. She was small frame, and she had all dressed in black. She wore a veil. I'm not sure about a hat. I don't know what the veil was attached to. But you could see a face, but her features weren't plain through the veil. I imagine that's why she wore the veil. She didn't want you to see who she was. But as I think about it, I relive it, and my heart's pounding now because she really was scary. My first Fair Lady was, I was coming home from the movies in Williamsport, going home to Tannery Row, which is now known as Fenton Avenue, when I saw the shadow behind the big tree there. And as I started by, it moved and came out. And I went to the middle of the road, and she came toward me. So I turned and ran.
Up here at the corner of Church and Conagee, one night somebody had supposed to have had something went down over their head and grabbed these two girls, and they ran, and one fell and skinned her knee off, and they ran over there on the, I think, on Ed Shank's porch. And but I don't remember them saying who it was. He never saw who it was. They were too scared, I guess.
When I asked my father why a person or whatever would try to scare somebody like that, a child, he said that he thought maybe it was a woman or whatever trying to protect the children, to keep them home, not go out after dark. And since then, I think, as I got older and thought back, I agree, because really, she never tried to harm me in any way. She just was there, and I think maybe he was right. And I know that people in Williamsport think that it was a joke, and it was a man dressed like a woman, and maybe they're right too. But the person I saw was a woman, definitely a woman.
You're watching Sleepcore, media for insomnia.
I'm Pamela Suzanne, and welcome to LA Now. Today, we're going to be talking about what it's like to try and catch a ghost, and we have some very exciting photographs to show you. In almost every culture of the world, folklore exists which mentions manifestations of long-lost friends who have died, family members, and strangers. Many of these manifestations can be thrown into the category of hysteria, imaginations, and hallucinations. But there have been too many accountings by credible witnesses who have seen the manifestation of a long loss of a dead loved one or friend materialize in front of their faces. Most of the research in this area has been basically done with the occult, but with the advent of psychical research and parapsychology, real ghost hunting and serious ghost hunting is taking place today. My very special guests are Mr. Barry Taft, parapsychologist for 22 years, and Mr. Barry Conrad, ghost hunter for the last several years. Hi and welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm glad to have you on our show. If anybody would like more information regarding our programming here on LA Now, please call and let us know, and we'll be happy to get back to you. Barry, I have to know, what does a parapsychologist do when hunting a ghost?
Well, our first objective is to try to document the fact that the phenomenon is really there, that the people aren't suffering from hallucination, they're not creating a hoax or a fraud. And once we document it to the best of our ability and prove that something is really going on, we try then to capture information in terms of on videotape, still frame photography like 35 millimeter, on audio recorders, and then objectify or document in terms of hard physical evidence that there is something happening there that's beyond our current understanding. So it's a very elongated process. You don't go in and just accept their story with blind faith.
Well, that's interesting. And Barry, why do you call yourself a ghost hunter?
Well, I was going to say I have a license, but I'm not going to. I shouldn't even mention that. But no, I became a ghost hunter actually seriously over the last couple of years. But it actually started when I was very young, about 10 or 12 years old. I think I saw an apparition. I'm not positive, but I believe I saw it with my cousin in an old house in Hamilton, Ohio, near where I grew up. And ever since then, I've been interested in parapsychology, strange phenomena, UFOs, but most keenly interested in haunting phenomena, because we have experienced this phenomena.
In hauntings, are there different types of haunted houses?
There's everything from the sense of a presence to full-blown apparitions appearing, to objects disappearing, to food being eaten, to machines being turned on or off, the bolt of light flying around, to the house shaking, to the water appearing and disappearing, being thrown at people. So it can go from one extreme to the other.
Are these haunted houses tied into the people who see them, or are they tied into just the houses themselves?
Well, it varies. You have a classic haunt, which can exist for years, decades, generations, or perhaps even century, or not millennia in a location. That's usually related to a violent death in the situation. Then you have poltergeist cases, which is the German word for noisy ghost. That usually centers around people and moves with them as opposed to the residents. And that's short-lived as opposed to long-lived.
Now, ghosts, are they different than apparitions? Or are they the same?
Well, an apparition is a visual manifestation of some sort, usually of a person who's deceased, old or new, and that means it's a visual formation, an optical image of the phenomena you're discussing. That's what an apparition is. There's three types of apparitions. There's a telepathic, there's crisis, and there's post-mortem.
What is telepathic?
Telepathic, real simply, is where you're seeing the image, but it seems to be generated from a living person. That you're seeing it perhaps in your mind's eye. It might not be shared by a whole group of people at the same time. A crisis apparition is where a person's in crisis. They're being killed, they're dying, they're ill, and they're many miles away. You're not aware of their precarious situation. And the people, a whole group, may see them appear as if they're a ghost, but they're quite alive. And post-mortem is self-explanatory. The person's been dead for at least 48 hours or more, but no one knows they're deceased, and you see them appear.
Now, when they appear, are they normally wearing what they were wearing at the time of their demise?
Yes, generally they wear clothes like we do. Sometimes it's what they wear when they had the accident that killed them or the incident that caused their demise, but rarely, if ever, do you hear of apparitions appearing without clothes, because we live in a clothed culture.
Now, when they come, do they give messages, Barry? Do they give messages to people?
Oh, very often they've been known to give messages. Sometimes there have even been ghosts that have come back and actually, well, in the case of tragic situations where you've had someone who's been murdered, there have been cases where ghosts have actually come back and revealed the name of the murderer in several cases. So there are times when they do give messages.
Now, there are times when you hear of hauntings, all you hear is noises or muffled voices, footsteps, but you don't actually see anything, versus the apparition that materializes in front of our face.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what would be the difference? Is one just a ghost and the other is considered an apparition?
Well, for example, a poltergeist case is classically manifested by strange noises, unexplained movement of objects, things like that. When you get manifestations of light or apparitions, that tends to be associated more with ghosts and hauntings than with poltergeist phenomena.
So poltergeist phenomena deals with more noises and objects moving around. Now, are there a lot of young children around when poltergeist activity is?
Well, I think we should make the distinction here. Poltergeist is now referred to as a form of psychokinesis, or mind over matter, and it usually comes from a young pubescent or adolescent child, although they can still exist well into adulthood, and it's generated from a living human agent, such as us. And these people usually have a lot of unresolved emotional conflicts, pent-up hostilities, they can't vent them, and the result is mind over matter.
That's called RSPK, which refers to recurrent spontaneous psychokinetics.
And how do they do this? Are they aware that they're...
Many of them aren't. Many of them aren't aware. In fact, very few of them are aware that we know of. There are people in situations where they may be working for an employer, like say in a factory. There was a very famous case in Miami, Florida, back in the early 60s, and the phone systems went haywire. There were objects moving around. There were, sounds sounded like explosions that were emanating from inside the factory, yet there was no physical cause. And yet the person who apparently this centered around, because they happened within this person's immediate environment, had no knowledge whatsoever that he was a part of anything, or subconsciously perhaps releasing this energy.
I see. We have some pictures of poltergeist activity that was captured on film. This activity is swirling around this woman while she's sitting in her home. Can we have the first picture up on, thank you.
This is from North Hollywood in 1975, and this is in the hallway, and they were taking a picture around Christmas time with a normal 35mm single lens reflex camera, and this white modeling you're seeing is very typical of what people used to call ectoplasm. We don't know what it is, but this is quite typical.
Can we have the next one up, please?
The next slide is was the poltergeist agent in this particular case. She was about 26 years of age here, and you see again the white modeling in front of her by the tree. This was totally invisible to the people taking the pictures, but it showed up on the transparencies or the negatives of these particular photographs. And whenever this girl moved around, the phenomena moved with her, so we assume that she's the poltergeist agent or the psychokinetic agent.
Now, she couldn't see this.
No, she couldn't, but they had objects being torn out of their hands like guitars, beds would go up and down, blood was dripping out of the fireplace and the shower head. Yeah, animal and human blood. And again, it seems this is more of a poltergeist phenomenon than a haunting.
Can we have the next picture, please?
This is a friend opening her Christmas presents on the morning, and you could see this white modeling in front of her, and she was also another poltergeist agent for many years, and this is all subsided now. This was like more than 15 years ago. But this is quite typical, this modeling, which we run across very frequently, as other researchers have, but we don't really know what it is.
And we have one more.
There's a woman who also sharing company with them, stayed in the house for a while. This is another white arc of light right in front of her, bending from the left to the right, center screen. And you can see there was another slide, which they wouldn't give us to keep, but there was almost looked like a manifestation of a white noose over her head of light, and they were very disturbed by that. They moved out of the house. The phenomena followed them to the next house, because the two women that we saw previously were the agents. They were the generators of the phenomena.
Now, can you help somebody that has that are poltergeist agents?
There's no way to cure the phenomenon. We don't even understand its nature, its mechanics. All we can do is help them calm down, relax, make them realize it's not going to hurt them, and try to get their life a little more settled, and hopefully it'll wane over time, which it usually does anyway.
You had a party.
No, we had a dinner party one evening.
Party,
a number of friends were over, and we brought some cameras just in case something happened, and we went around skulking the house with the lights out with a Nikon 8008 just to see what would happen, and we had some luck.
You had some luck. We have some pictures, 2 pictures that they captured.
Okay, this is in the hallway looking into the bathroom. We heard some sounds. We opened the door, and there were 2 distinct balls of light, which you're seeing here on the in frame. And the one on the right, who was enlarged, the bottom lower left edge of the right sphere is ejecting matter. It looks like some sort of plasma or electrical discharge. And we then moved closer, and the next picture, you can see that the two balls of light are still present. We're closer in. They've changed from a horizontal to vertical position, although we didn't see this. Following this picture, they flew over our heads and vanished somewhere in the house. But we hit the deck because if this was ball lightning or, say, almost fire, and it hit us, it could very badly burn you or damage you. So we decided to hit the deck. And we saw a number of these throughout the house. It's the only thing we could photograph with our camera.
That is amazing.
This balls of light, it should be brought out, is that we don't really know what these balls of light are, but they do seem to be present when poltergeist is present or haunting is in progress. But we have actually also picked these up with our videotape cameras. And I don't know exactly, we can't tell you what they are, but we do know that we studied some videotapes that I personally shot of some of these lights in a more recent case, and they appear to be insect-like at times. They are self-luminescent, they glow, but the problem is they can't be insects because they travel over 80 miles an hour at different times, and there are no fireflies in Southern California.
How do you know that they're traveling so fast?
Well, we had physicists come in and study the frame rate. We know there are 30 frames to a second of videotape, so therefore they can estimate the distance that it travels within the frame, within that second, and judge the speed from that.
Oh, that's interesting.
You're watching Sleepcore. Sleep tight.
Hello, my name is Henry Matthews, and I am the host of the At Once Show, broadcast live on WACN TV. Today, in order to bring my testimony to the Documents Interdits series, I would like to show you some pictures that very few people have ever seen. But first, let me tell you a little bit about At Once. 3 times a week, we open the television station switchboard between the hours of 8 p.m. and midnight. On a simple call from a member of the general public who wishes to bear testimony or would like to shed light on some particular event or situation that we agree should be exposed to the public, we dispatch a mobile television crew so that we can all witness live the development of the situation. In the 3 years that we've been broadcasting this show, we've never run into any true serious problems. We've had some rather strong, intense moments, but never anything that could have endangered the crew's life. Although they are often subject to rather erratic and peculiar human behavior, very different people living in all sorts of places. No, I would say that At Once is the sort of television show which needs an enormous technical backup, because we are willing to go anywhere. We are on the lookout for anything, and we show everything. On May 15th, 1989, at 8:45 p.m., we received a call from Mrs. Anna Marie Ferguson at 1036 Sun Avenue.
At Once, good evening, go ahead. Your name and address, please. What's that noise? What are they? Animals, squatters, water pipes? Have you called the police? Do you feel you're in danger? Okay, Mrs. Ferguson. They're in your house, they're noisy. You don't know what they are, and the police have found nothing. Hello? Hello?
Oh, they're opening the door.
Yeah, 1036. Well, it looks pretty deserted, if you ask me. I think I want to verify the address. Henry, could you confirm the address for me, please? Well, this is the place. I don't see an intercom, so what I think we're going to do is just continue along up the driveway till we get to the house, and I'm sure that we'll find Mrs. Ferguson there. She's probably seen us arrive on the television set, and she should be waiting for us at the front door. Just want to remind you we're at 1036 Sun Avenue, We got a call from a Mrs. Ferguson. Apparently, she's been hearing some mysterious sounds inside her house, and we want to check out what that's all about. Mrs. Ferguson? Mrs. Ferguson? It's the At Once crew. We're here. No answer. I don't see any lights on up there either. In fact, the place looks a little empty right now. While we're waiting for Mrs. Ferguson to come out, why don't we take a look at these grounds, what we can see anyway. Some trees over there, and a nice wall. This appears to be, I'd say, a manor house. It must be probably a good 100 years old, but it's in lovely condition. Ah, there's something here at the front door. Mrs. Ferguson? Mrs. Ferguson, it's the At Once crew. Come on out and meet us. We'd love to see you. Maybe she's a little bit shy, huh? Well, that's okay. Maybe she'd like to remain anonymous. We at the At Once show certainly do respect your anonymity. After all, this is your show, and, well, if you choose to be like that, that's just okay with us. We're just here to help you get your show going. Mrs. Ferguson? Come on up. See what's going on here. Mrs. Ferguson? If you can hear me, it's the At Once show. Would you mind if we came in? That's pretty strange.
Hello. Let's take a look over here. Well, there's no one down there, no one there. Whoa. As you can see, this is a very spacious and gracious house. And someone could hide here for a very long time if they didn't want to be found. Take a look at that. Beautiful frescoes on the ceiling. I would say that that's an indication of the tastes of our hosts, of the people who live here, from whom we'd be very pleased to receive a guided tour at any time. Let's take a look upstairs. Mrs. Ferguson, it's the At Once crew. We took the liberty of allowing ourselves in because you opened the door for us. Mrs. Ferguson. Well, here we are in a small lounge, which is right next door to a much larger lounge. And as I get to take a look around here, I see that it's absolutely filled with pieces of art, all shapes and sizes and descriptions. Obviously, this is the home of a great collector. But we still haven't seen Mrs. Ferguson, nor has she given us any indication of where she is. Henry, can you hear me? Because I certainly cannot hear you. I've got to tell you something. As you might be able to see, our light has gotten quite a bit dimmer. And we lost contact. I don't know if it was we were cut off or just what happened, but it was very strange. I don't know, did you receive me? It's the At Once crew. We're live on WACN TV. Mrs. Ferguson. Mrs. Ferguson. Mrs. Ferguson, would you come out, please?
This is where we cut off, because suddenly this horror film situation turned to drama. Sometime before, another car and crew had left to go to 1036 Sun Avenue, and the pictures we received were these. The car was the undeniable proof that it was the same place, 1036 Sun Avenue. Now, watch carefully the pictures that follow. when I put the first crew back on air, this is what I received.
Henry Matthews, I think you can still hear me, even though I can't hear you. So I'm going to continue with our visit. I don't know how much you can see, though, because I've never done a live broadcast in the dark. But while we still have a little light left, we're going to see what's around here. Just a second. Come in here. Take a look at this. What? This is very strange. It's all over the floor. I don't know what it is. It looks like it's incredible. It's like snow.
In the beginning, we couldn't believe it, and we kept switching from the inside to the outside. But then we had to admit that we were facing some kind of supernatural manifestation, a different reality. I had only to push that on-air button to let 12 million viewers see this spectacle. But I couldn't push the button.
This corridor is far too long to be part of the house we entered. I gotta tell you, I don't feel very comfortable about this whole situation. There's something unhealthy, almost unreal about this place. I don't know what it is. One thing I can tell you, it's not fake. And to prove that to you, we're going to keep going until we find out exactly what's going on around here. Mrs. Ferguson! Whoa. I don't know about the quality of the pictures you're still receiving, but can you see that over there? There's, it seems to be an almost human-like shape on top of what seems to be a sofa. Let's go a little bit closer, take a look. Now, if you're feeling a little sensitive, maybe you just better back away from the TV screen. Mrs. Ferguson? That's nothing. I thought I heard something from over there. Let's go check it out. Almost beyond this wall, it seems. What is this? This house is in total decomposition. Can you see that? Beginning to wonder if we still have a ceiling over our heads. Mrs. Ferguson!
I would like you to stay watching this picture, as we did. Powerless, eaten by anxiety, not knowing what to do. We made inquiries. So did the police. We searched the place from top to bottom, in vain. All that was left to us was that telephone conversation recorded at the switchboard at 8:45. But there again, another great surprise awaited us. We had it analyzed to the extent of rooting out the words that were hidden underneath all that crackling. You'll remember that the connection was very poor, that the voice seemed very distant. And indeed it was. That conversation dated back to the 1930s when Anna Mae Ferguson lived in that house. In those days, the region was developing so rapidly that the city development couldn't keep up with it, namely the sewers. And so they had a lot of rat problems for a couple of years. And Mrs. Ferguson was, in fact, calling the exterminators. Well, you can imagine the interference on the line.